Thunder cracked like a gunshot in the distance. Rain hammered against the glass of a grand Italian villa, each drop echoing like the ticking of a clock that had almost stopped. Inside, under the dim light of golden chandeliers, a boy no older than 12 lay still. His chest barely moved. The steady beep of a machine was the only sign that life hadn't completely left him. Around his bed stood 10 of the world's most expensive doctors, men flown in from Switzerland, Japan, America, each wearing the same expression of defeat. 3 years of treatment, endless surgeries, endless prayers. Yet the boy's eyes never opened. His lips never spoke. And behind them all stood the man who could buy anything, except time. Don Alessandro Moretti, the most feared MAFIA boss in Europe. His black suit looked like armor, but his eyes told another story, one of a father watching his empire crumble in silence. One of the doctors stepped forward, his voice trembling. "We've done all we can, sir." Don Moretti's jaw tightened. "You said that last month," he growled. "And the month before." The doctor swallowed hard, glancing toward the floor. "It's impossible." The word hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, no one breathed. The MAFIA boss turned, staring out the rain-streaked window. "Impossible," he repeated softly, almost to himself. "I built an empire on making the impossible possible." His wife, Isabella, stood behind him, her face pale and streaked with tears. She had prayed in every church from Rome to Cairo. She had offered gold to priests, blood to healers, promises to saints. Nothing. Their boy, their only boy, was dying in a house made of marble and silence. That night, lightning split the sky open like a wound. The rain refused to stop. Nurses whispered prayers in the hallway. And in that storm, something unexpected happened. Isabella, desperate for air, stepped out into the hospital corridor. That's when she heard it, a soft, unfamiliar sound cutting through the chaos. A song. A low, warm hum that seemed to calm the air around it. It came from a young black woman mopping the floor. Her name tag read Amara Johnson. 23 years old. The daughter of a cleaning lady who worked the night shift. Isabella stopped, transfixed. The melody was haunting, African, ancient, filled with something deeper than words. Amara noticed her staring and froze. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to." "What were you humming?" Isabella interrupted, her voice fragile. "It's a healing song," Amara replied softly. "My grandmother used to sing it when children were sick." For a long moment, Isabella just looked at her, at the calm in her eyes, the stillness in her presence. "Come," she said suddenly. "Please." She grabbed Amara's hand, dragging her toward the ICU. The nurses gasped. Security shouted, "Signora Moretti, you can't." But Isabella didn't care. She led Amara straight to the boy's bed. The doctors protested, their pride swelling. "This is madness. You can't let a janitor touch the patient." But Isabella silenced them with a single glance. Amara stood at the boy's side. The smell of antiseptic filled the room. Machines beeped softly. She placed a trembling hand on his wrist. Closed her eyes. The storm outside grew louder. Everyone held their breath. And then, the boy's finger twitched. Just barely. But enough to make every doctor's eyes widen in disbelief. Isabella gasped, clutching her mouth. "He moved," she whispered. "My God, he moved." The lead doctor rushed forward, checking the monitors. It's a reflex," he stammered. But the boy's pulse had changed. The rhythm was stronger, faster, alive. A shadow moved at the doorway. Don Moretti stepped in, his presence like thunder. He stared at the girl standing beside his son. Her hand still on his wrist. Her eyes steady. For the first time in years, there was something new in that room. Hope. "Who are you?" His voice was low, dangerous. The room went silent. Amara turned to him slowly, her face calm but her heart pounding. "I'm nobody," she said quietly. "But I know how to heal what money can't." The words hit him like a slap. Nobody had ever spoken to Don Moretti like that, not without shaking. He studied her, searching for arrogance, for fear, for anything to explain this girl who looked like she'd walked straight out of a storm. "Get her out," one of the doctors whispered. "This is absurd." But the boy's pulse was still strong, stronger than it had been in months. And for the first time in 3 years, Don Moretti didn't know what to do. He turned to his wife. "Who is she?" "A cleaner's daughter," Isabella said, voice trembling. "But I saw something in her." The Mafia boss stared back at the girl. "You think you can heal my son?" Amara looked him straight in the eye. "No," she said simply. "I don't think. I believe." The room held its breath. Don Moretti's men shifted uncomfortably. The doctors whispered behind him. But the boss didn't move. He just stared, the kind of stare that could freeze a man where he stood. And yet, the girl didn't flinch. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley. Inside, the air was thick with something no one could name. Faith, maybe. Madness, maybe. But everyone in that room felt it. The beginning of something they didn't understand. Amara slowly removed her hand from the boy's wrist. The machines beeped normally again. She stepped back, her mop bucket still waiting in the hallway. For a moment, it was silent except for the rain. Then Don Moretti spoke, his voice softer than before. "You'll come back tomorrow." Amara nodded once. "Yes, sir." As she left, one of the nurses whispered, "Who does she think she is?" Another answered, "Just the janitor's kid." But behind them, Don Moretti stood in the doorway, watching her disappear down the hall. Something in his chest, long dead, began to stir again. That night, he stood by his son's bedside, listening to the storm fade away. The boy's breathing was steady now. The monitors glowed like tiny stars. And somewhere deep inside that house of marble and fear, a quiet storm had begun to rise. Because sometimes, the miracle you've been chasing doesn't come from power or science or gold. Sometimes it comes from the one person nobody sees, the one who cleans the floors while others try to clean their hands. And though Don Moretti didn't know it yet, the girl who called herself Nobody was about to change everything. The golden halls of San Aurelio Private Hospital gleamed like a temple of wealth. Marble floors reflected light from crystal chandeliers. The air smelled of money, medicine, and quiet arrogance. Somewhere in those perfect corridors, a storm was brewing, one that didn't come from the sky, but from a young woman who refused to bow. Her name was Amara Johnson, the daughter of a cleaning lady, and for the past week, whispers followed her wherever she went. "That's her," the nurses said. "The janitor's kid who thinks she can cure a mafia prince." The doctors smirked when she passed. Some laughed openly. But Amara kept walking, her head high, her mother's ID badge still clipped to her pocket as a reminder of where she came from, and why she could never give up. Inside the patient room, the boy, Luca Moretti, lay motionless. His small hands rested on the white sheets, his chest rising and falling faintly beneath the wires and tubes. His father stood in the corner, silent, eyes cold as stone. Don Alessandro Moretti, the man who could end lives with a whisper, now stood powerless before his own child suffering. He turned to Amara as she entered. His voice was low, heavy. "You have 7 days," he said. "Heal my son, or your mother will never work in this city again." The words hung in the air like smoke. Amara's hands trembled, but she didn't look away. "Then I have 7 days," she said quietly. He studied her, searching for fear, but found only calm. That calm made him uneasy. Every morning, she came before sunrise. While the world slept, Amara hummed soft African lullabies, songs her grandmother had sung during fevers and droughts. She mixed herbs in secret, grinding leaves her mother brought from the old neighborhood. She whispered to the boy, even when he couldn't hear. "You're safe now, little one. Breathe. Come back to your mother." The nurses rolled their eyes, muttering about superstition. But Amara didn't stop. She didn't pray for miracles. She worked for them. On the 4th day, something changed. The boy's fingers twitched again, just slightly. Then, the next morning, his eyelids fluttered open for half a second before closing. The monitors showed a rise in brain activity. The nurses gasped. One ran to fetch the doctors. But instead of celebrating, they grew angry. "It's coincidence," said Dr. Vaselli, the hospital's lead surgeon. "Nothing more." His pride couldn't accept that a cleaning woman's daughter might succeed where he had failed. As the days passed, jealousy turned into sabotage. One night, Amara noticed the medicine on the tray had been switched. Labels replaced. Doses altered. She stayed awake all night, reading charts, memorizing every detail. She knew what was happening. Someone wanted her to fail. But she refused to stop. By the 6th day, Luca's mother, Isabella, began to hope again. She would sit beside Amara, holding the boy's hand, whispering prayers in Italian. "If he wakes, I'll thank God," she said. "If he lives, I'll thank you." Amara only smiled. Thank the love that won't give up. But Dr. Vaseli couldn't bear it anymore. That night, he confronted Amara in the hallway. "You don't belong here," he hissed. "You're nothing but a girl from the slums. You think your songs can cure what science couldn't." Amara stood her ground. "No," she said softly. "I think love can." He laughed, bitter and sharp. "We'll see." The next morning, Luca's condition crashed. His pulse weakened, the monitors screamed. Doctors rushed in. "She did this," Vaseli shouted. "She's been experimenting." Panic erupted. Isabella screamed as nurses tried to pull Amara away. Guards stormed in. Don Moretti appeared, face twisted with rage. "I warned you," he shouted. His hand trembled as he drew his gun. The nurses froze. Even the machines seemed to hold their breath. Amara's mother fell to her knees, crying, "Please, sir, she didn't," but Don Moretti raised the weapon anyway. His voice broke through the silence like thunder. "You touched my son. You think you can play with his life." Amara looked at him. Her body shook, but her voice didn't. She stepped forward, right up to the barrel of his gun. "You can kill me," she said quietly, tears burning her eyes. "But your son will die with your pride." The room froze. Even the rain outside stopped for a moment, as if the world itself was listening. The words hit the Mafia boss harder than any bullet. His hand trembled. His eyes, always cold and unreadable, flickered with something human. Guilt, maybe. Fear, maybe. He lowered the gun slowly, his shoulders sagging. Isabella sobbed into her hands. The guards stood in stunned silence. Amara didn't move. She just looked at him, not like he was a monster, but like he was a man who had forgotten what love felt like. "You want your son to live," she whispered. "Then let go of your anger. Let me do what I came here to do." Don Moretti turned away, his jaw tight, eyes wet with something he would never admit to. After a long, unbearable silence, he spoke. "You have one night," he said. "Just one." Then he walked out, leaving the door wide open behind him. Amara sank to her knees, shaking. Her mother wrapped her arms around her. "Why would you do that?" she whispered. "He could have killed you." Amara wiped her tears, her voice barely a breath. "Because he's already dying, Mama. And I won't let his boy die too." That night, while thunder rolled across the valley, Amara returned to the room. The doctors had gone. The lights were dim. The boy's breathing was faint but steady. She touched his forehead gently and whispered the same lullaby again. 4 hours, she sang, mixed her herbs, and prayed in her own quiet way. Not to be famous. Not to be right. Just to save a life. In another part of the mansion, Don Moretti stood alone in his office. He poured himself a drink but didn't touch it. His mind replayed her words again and again. "Your son will die with your pride." He clenched his fists. For the first time in years, he didn't feel powerful. He felt small. Helpless. Human. Outside, the storm raged on, and in that darkness, something inside both of them began to break, and something even stronger began to form. The girl who had nothing now held the life of a Mafia prince in her hands. And the man who had everything was learning, painfully, that all his power meant nothing against the quiet courage of one black woman who refused to stop believing. The night wasn't over. The test had only begun. The storm outside howled like a wounded beast. Lightning flashed against the tall windows of the Moretti estate, turning the marble floors into mirrors of fire and shadow. Inside, silence ruled, the heavy kind that sits on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Amara Johnson stood beside the boy's bed, her eyes red from sleepless nights. It was her last chance. Don Moretti's warning still echoed in her head. One night. That's all you get. One night to do what 100 doctors couldn't. One night to prove that faith, heart, and humanity could touch what power and money could not. Her mother sat quietly in the corner, fingers clutching a rosary, whispering prayers into the dim light. The machines around them hummed softly, counting every fragile breath the boy took. Amara didn't speak. She moved slowly, carefully, setting out the small bowls she had brought from home, ground herbs, a few oils, and a folded handkerchief that once belonged to her grandmother. It smelled faintly of home, of clay, of something pure and alive. Amara took a deep breath and began to hum. The same ancient melody her grandmother had sung under starlit African skies. A song older than hospitals, older than medicine. Her voice was soft, trembling at first, but steadying with every note. The rhythm filled the room, wrapping around the boy like a blanket. The heart monitor beeped, slow and uncertain, as if listening. Don Moretti stood in the doorway, hidden in the shadows. He hadn't slept. He told himself he came to make sure the girl didn't do anything foolish, but in truth, he couldn't stay away. He had seen a lot in his life: blood, power, betrayal. But what he saw in that girl's eyes was something he didn't understand, a kind of light he had long forgotten existed. Hours passed. Amara worked like she was painting a soul back into the boy's body. She traced gentle patterns across his wrist with her fingers, using oils and herbs, whispering prayers in between breaths. Her mother watched, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Baby," she said softly, "you've done all you can." But Amara shook her head. "Not yet." Outside, thunder rolled again. The rain hit harder, like fists against the glass. Then something changed. The boy's breathing faltered, once, twice, and then steadied. The machine beeped louder, stronger. Amara froze. Her eyes darted to the screen. His pulse was climbing. Slowly, but surely. "Mama," she whispered, voice trembling. "He's coming back." Don Moretti stepped into the room, eyes wide. He moved toward the bed like a man walking through a dream. The boy's fingers twitched. Then, slowly, his eyelids fluttered open. His voice was barely a whisper. "Papa." The sound hit like thunder in the old man's chest. He dropped to his knees beside the bed. For a long time, he couldn't speak. He just stared at his son, his world, his redemption, alive again. Tears slid down his weathered face, something his men had never seen, something he hadn't allowed himself in decades. Amara stepped back, silent, her hands trembling. The doctors burst in, wide-eyed, rushing to the monitors. "How is this possible?" Dr. Vasselli stammered. This can't be." His voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. The same men who mocked her now stood like children in front of a miracle. Don Moretti turned to them, his voice low and shaking. "You said it was impossible." No one answered. The only sound was the rain and the steady rhythm of Luca's heartbeat. "Papa," the boy whispered again, weak but alive. Don Moretti grabbed his hand, pressing it against his lips. "I'm here, my son," he said, voice breaking. "I'm right here." Amara's mother sobbed into her hands. Amara herself didn't smile. She just looked at the boy, at the man beside him, and whispered, "Thank you." Not to them, to something higher. To every woman who had ever been told she was nothing. When the news spread, it hit the city like wildfire. The impossible had happened. The untouchable Don Moretti's son had been saved, not by doctors, not by priests, but by the black daughter of a cleaning lady. Cameras swarmed the hospital. Headlines screamed, "Miracle worker or myth." Reporters begged for her name, for her story. But Amara refused every interview. She packed her few belongings, took her mother's hand, and walked out quietly before dawn. Don Moretti tried to stop her. "I can pay you anything," he said. "You'll never have to work again." But she shook her head. "I didn't do it for money, sir. I did it because no child deserves to die without being touched by love." Those words cut deeper than any bullet. He wanted to thank her, but the words caught in his throat. For a moment, they just stood there, two souls from different worlds, bound by one truth. Life doesn't bend to wealth, but to grace. The next day, the tabloids went mad. The janitor's daughter who saved the MAFIA prince. Don's empire saved by a black angel. But for Don Moretti, every headline was a knife. His enemies mocked him. Rivals laughed. His empire, built on fear, now trembled under the weight of humility. But somewhere deep inside, he didn't care anymore. He had seen something greater than pride. Something that no man, no money, no power could buy. He had seen the face of mercy, and it looked a lot like Amara Johnson. Amara returned home to the slums where the streets smelled of smoke and iron. Children ran barefoot. Her mother went back to her cleaning job. Life didn't change for them, but it felt different. Because they knew that somewhere in a marble villa, a child was breathing because of her. Some nights, she would hear the lullaby again, not from her lips, but from memory. The same song that had crossed oceans and generations, reminding her that healing wasn't about science or status. It was about love. The kind the world can't measure, but everyone feels. Don Moretti, meanwhile, sat by his son's bedside for hours, thinking of that girl. The one who had risked everything with nothing to gain. The one who had walked into his house with empty hands, and left it filled with something eternal. He watched Luca sleep, the boy's chest rising steady and strong, and whispered, "Thank you." But Amara never came back. She didn't need to. Her work was done. Because some healers don't wear white coats. Some don't speak Latin. Some don't have degrees hanging on walls. They carry their medicine inside them, in their hearts, in their songs, in their courage to stand before power and still choose compassion. And as the storm finally faded from the skies above Italy, one thing became clear. The girl they called Nobody had done what no man on earth could. She hadn't just healed a boy. She had healed a father's soul. But her story wasn't over yet. Because the man who once ruled through fear was about to be reborn through grace. The villa that once echoed with the footsteps of killers now carried a different kind of silence, the kind born not from fear, but from peace. Don Alessandro Moretti stood before the tall glass windows of his mansion, staring out at the same storm-torn horizon where his son had once nearly died. But this time, the rain didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like redemption. The walls that had witnessed violence for decades now hummed with prayer. The guards who once carried guns now carried boxes of food for the poor. Change had come quietly, like a whisper in a cathedral, all because of one girl. Amara Johnson's name was never spoken in the underworld. Not out of shame, but reverence. Her miracle had become legend, the janitor's daughter who healed what empires of wealth could not. The Don had changed in ways even his enemies couldn't understand. He sold his casinos. He dismantled his arms network. He shut down the trafficking routes that made him powerful. His men begged him to reconsider, to hold on to the throne he had built with blood and gold. But he only said one thing: "I've seen death up close." And she was a girl named Amara. Months passed. The newspapers called it the fall of the Mafia king. But it wasn't a fall, it was a resurrection. The once feared Don spent his fortune building something the world had never expected from him, a foundation for underprivileged students. He named it the Amara Initiative. Thousands of children from broken homes, refugee camps, and city slums found hope under its roof. When reporters asked him why he had changed, he didn't give them a long speech. He simply said, "Because I met a girl who reminded me what God looks like." Meanwhile, Amara had disappeared from the spotlight entirely. She returned to her small apartment on the edge of the city, where her mother still mopped hospital floors at dawn. She refused interviews, refused money, refused fame. She wanted peace, not applause. At night, she studied medicine by candlelight, teaching herself what no university had ever offered her. Her mother often asked why she didn't try to find Don Moretti again. After all, he owed her everything. But Amara would just smile and say, "He doesn't owe me. The healing was for his son, not for me." Then one evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, a black car stopped outside their door. Two men in dark suits stepped out, but there was no threat in their eyes. They carried a small red box sealed with wax. Inside was a letter, written in Don Moretti's own hand. The ink had bled slightly, as if his hands had trembled while writing. The letter read, "You healed my son's body, but you healed my soul more. The world needs doctors like you, Amara. This is your time now." Beneath it lay a scholarship, full tuition to the University of Florence, funded by the Amara Initiative. Her mother wept. Amara just sat in silence, staring at the letter. The rain had started again, tapping gently on the windows, as if the world itself was blessing her next step. She packed her books, kissed her mother's forehead, and left for Florence the next morning. The girl who had once cleaned hospital floors now walked through marble halls with her head held high. Professors doubted her at first, the accent, the skin color, the lack of pedigree. But Amara didn't argue. She let her work speak. Her brilliance silenced every whisper. Her humility disarmed every prejudice. Years passed, and the world slowly forgot about the MAFIA miracle. But one night, at an international medical conference in Geneva, her name echoed through the speakers once more. Dr. Amara Johnson, recipient of the Global Humanitarian Medicine Award. The audience rose as she stepped onto the stage, not as a janitor's daughter, but as a healer whose heart had rewritten destiny. Cameras flashed. The hall fell silent. She adjusted the microphone, took a deep breath, and began to speak, softly, humbly. "Once, I healed a boy who had everything money could buy," she said. "But the sickness wasn't in his body, it was in the hearts of those who believed money could buy miracles. I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't supposed to matter. But someone believed, for just one moment, that maybe faith and love were enough." She paused, looking out at the crowd. "Don't let where you come from decide what you can heal. Sometimes the purest medicine is love." The room erupted in applause. Cameras caught tears in the eyes of people who had never cried before. And somewhere, in a quiet villa by the sea, Don Moretti watched her speech on a flickering screen. His hair was grayer now, his empire long gone, but his eyes, they shone with peace. His son sat beside him, healthy, smiling. When the applause filled the screen, the Don closed his eyes and whispered, "You were right, Amara. Pride kills. Love heals." Outside, the storm had finally cleared. The sky above Italy glowed in hues of gold and pink. In that light, two worlds, one born of crime, the other of compassion, seemed to meet for a brief, sacred moment. The janitor's daughter had healed more than a life. She had healed a legacy. And in that final silence, as the world moved on, one truth remained, that the greatest miracles don't come from power, money, or fear. They come from the courage to care when no one else will. Because sometimes, one act of kindness from someone the world calls nobody can rewrite the destiny of those who think they're everything. That, in the end, was Amara's legacy. Not fame, not fortune, but faith in something greater. A reminder that humanity, not hierarchy, is the greatest cure of all.